When trying to learn the quantum mechanical model of an atom, it can be hard to visualize the abstract form of this topic. So here's a short story to help you visualize things better. Here's a story of the quantum kingdom with a special focus on the electron saga that has been occurring in this kingdom. There was a great palace where a king lived. Take this palace as the nucleus of an atom. The entire kingdom was divided into large areas, much like different states to what a country has now. The bigger the area, the further it was from the palace or the nucleus. These levels were named n equals to 1, n equals to 2, n equals to 3, and n equals to 4. The higher the number, the more energy an electron needs to live there. With each district, there were different types of neighborhoods where the electrons could live. In the area closest to the nucleus, there was the S neighborhood. Moving slightly away to the second area, or n equals to 2, we had the same S neighborhood, and there was an additional neighborhood called the P neighborhood. In the third area, there was not only the S and the P, there was a new demure neighborhood called the D neighborhood. And in the fourth area, there was not only the S, P, and D neighborhood, the electrons had another fancy neighborhood called the F neighborhood. Now everyone that lived here lived by the motto, have a super positive day forward. Now what I just did there is to help you remember the sequence of the neighborhoods. Super for S, P for positive, D for day, and F for the F neighborhood, which is forward. So it's super positive day forward. Next, we are going to dive into each neighborhood and learn the town planning aspect of each neighborhood. The S neighborhood had only one street to it. Okay, so it's a small neighborhood and it had only one street. The P neighborhood had 3 streets to it. And the D neighborhood had 5 streets, whereas the F neighborhood had 7 streets. The way to think about this is that regardless if the S neighborhood was closest or furthest from the palace, it will always have one street in its neighborhood. Same idea goes for the P, D, and F neighborhoods, meaning to say the number of streets are fixed. The street in the S neighborhood is called L equals to 0. Yes. The awkwardness of the street name has got a lot to do with the king's preference for math. And as the king counts in his sleep, he decided to name all the street with numbers. In the P neighborhood, it was named with numbers beginning from -1 to 1. So the 3 streets were -1, 0, and 1. For the D neighborhood, instead of beginning with 1, the king started with 2. Therefore, the streets were named ranging from numbers from -2 to 2. By now, you can already guess what number the F neighborhood will begin with. If S started with 0, and P started with 1, and D started with 2, the F started with 3, and therefore the range of the streets or the names of the streets in the F neighborhood were from -3 to 3. After naming the streets, let's look at how many people lived in these streets. For each street, regardless of the name, they had 2 people living on them, or in the case of an atom, 2 electrons. So the S had 2 people on its street. Now I'm going to fill up the people in each neighborhood. The D, given 5 streets, each street had 2 people. And the same went for the F neighborhood. Let's zoom into the 2 people or the 2 electrons to understand them better. Now the S neighborhood, which had one street with two people, let's take it that the two people were of different genders, or it can be said that the two electrons that were living in the S neighborhood had opposite spins, which differentiates both the people or electrons from one another. Smart king, right? He really knew how to keep tabs of his people. Given there was only one street, and since each street could hold two electrons or two people, the maximum number of people in the S neighborhood will be 2 or 2 electrons. What do you think the maximum number of electrons in the P neighborhood would be? If you guessed 6, then you are right. Now here's why. The P neighborhood had 3 streets. And given that each street could have 2 people, it means that the maximum number of electrons or people in the P neighborhood, and I'm going to bring in a new term, or the P orbital, will be 6 electrons. Similar thing for the D neighborhood. There were 5 streets. Each street, 2 electrons, meaning the D orbital or the D neighborhood could hold a maximum of 10 electrons. Let's break the F neighborhood down. Similar way of thinking. 7 streets. Each street can hold 2 electrons. Therefore, the maximum number of electrons in the F neighborhood will be 14. Now, when I say maximum number, it does not mean the F neighborhood must always have 14. The number of electrons or people could be anywhere from 0 to 14, but it cannot exceed the 14 number. That means you will not have 16 or more or 15 or more electrons or people in this area. Now that's how the king town planned his kingdom, with much wisdom that every person or electron will have a unique address, and at most 2 electrons will share 3 common aspects, not all 4. So what did I just mean by that? The 3 common aspects that 2 people will share would be they may be from the same area, the same neighborhood, or the same street, but they cannot be from the same gender. So there, with this being in the same area, same neighborhood, and the same street, these are the 3 common things an electron will have, but they will always have opposite spins. This is how the king kept its people safe without any accidents, so that they did not collide into one another. And the king was a very happy person as he roamed his kingdom frequently. Here is how it all aligns. The areas that I spoke about represented the principal quantum number. That's why I named it N. The neighborhoods represented the angular momentum quantum number, which was L. L represents orbitals. So we have a few kinds of orbitals. Typically, the S orbital, P orbital, D orbital, and F orbital. The streets represented the magnetic quantum number or the orientation of each orbital. So given that the S neighborhood only had one street, it means it has one orientation. The P orbital has 3 streets. It has 3 orientation or 3 different types. The opposite genders represents the magnetic spin quantum number of the electrons. This is a simple analogy for you to understand things better. I'll see you in my next video for something more technical on how all these 4 quantum numbers give into electron configurations. Thank you and see you there.